it's very interesting how once they could try to like the status, right? Definitely those welfare status. They wanted to sit there and point. They were waiting for something to go wrong with Texas and mass like this when it came to how it handles its electricity. And you're seeing this with not just the reaction from people even out of town. I would say mainly that's coming from people out of town, but it's also coming from people within it, because they are under this moronic impression that Texas is just ran by nothing but Republicans, top to bottom. Never mind the fact that both ERCOT and the Public Utility Commission of Texas has had people of different political slants part of them. So if it has been a problem, it's a problem of both of you crackheads in combination. But it's just so interesting how everybody warped and zeroed in on what happened with Texas and what was going on with Texas, because for one, nothing like this had ever happened. I'm tired of people bringing up 2011 winter storm. 2011 winter storm only impacted certain areas of Texas, and on top of that, it was not an instance like this where if one was this cold for this long, or this storm was this bad, impacting like the entire geographical area almost when it comes to Texas. Not only that, these crackheads, I'm trying to tell you, when it comes to Texas, though, they treat it with a different set of standards because they want to pin something bad on it. Is more so what it is. So yeah, we already know ERCOT, the issues that came with that, and the regulatory body, which all that is the regulatory wing when it comes to handling the electric load here. But they wanted to point to something bad that happened. They got it. The winter storm in 2011 was not this, which is the point that I was previously making. It wasn't. This is something that's very unique. It's like a once in a generation kind of situation where you're having like basically the entire state get hit with a winter storm where you're talking about it's below zero in Texas. That's unheard of. That does not happen like that. But it did. And clearly there were some issues that came with it in regards to its electricity. And because they were itching to demonize what happened with Texas, they completely ignored everything else. I don't know if you guys knew, and some of you, what I'm about to tell you guys is news, which it shouldn't be news, but it's absolutely news. I told y'all before, they don't like independence. That's why. So never mind the gaslighting. That they don't care about like that. I mean, of course, they're just going to make stuff up if they can. And like they say, what you see with your own eyes is basically not a thing. But I'm about to tell you guys something. Some of you may know, some of you guys don't. Did y'all not know that Mississippi had almost 200,000 people, or around 200,000 people that went without power, and it slowly dwindled? Probably never even heard of that scenario. Oregon had almost 300,000 people that were without power. I know Kentucky had 100,000, but let's focus on those two. You're probably thinking, well, it wasn't as bad as what happened in Texas, because Texas had like 3 million people that were out of power. Well, yeah, Texas also has 30 million people that live in it. There's like, what, 3 million, I believe, or so, like 2 to 3 million, like 3 million or so that lives in Mississippi, 4 million that lives in Oregon. So the argument that people had made was because, well, Texas wanted to avoid federal regulations. And if they didn't want to avoid federal regulations and they were part of the main interconnections, this wouldn't have happened. Like I mentioned, they never can tell you what specific, because they say that weatherized is a term they love to use. Weatherized or winterized is the terms they love to use. They say, well, because they weren't weatherized, this happened. They never can point to the specific federal regulation that would have prevented this. Let's say if they had been more so connected to one of the main interconnections. They never mention that because they don't know what it is, just repeating what someone else said. But also, both of these, Oregon to the west, to the east, Mississippi. So you got the west and the eastern interconnection. Apparently this storm was so bad that it didn't stop them from having the issues that they had. That's bizarre. So somehow, well, let me backcheck. Let me get the arguments correct here. So you mean to tell me that if Texas electrical grid and their interconnection was more so part of the others, okay, this would have been prevented, but the people that are part of the states that are part of the other interconnections, both west and east, we got them both taken care of, had problems almost as bad. They was slightly less worse, but it was still bad when you consider the population. Still bad. But apparently they didn't stop them from having that issues. That's amazing. That's an amazing thing. Huh. It's almost like y'all are just making stuff up. It's the Southwest Power Pole, which is basically the closest interconnection to. Matter of fact, Southwest Power Pole there's a parts of Texas, by the way, Panhandle and a little bit over to the east. There's part of Texas that is actually not part of the main interconnection. Right? Southwest Power Pole is part of the Eastern, if I'm not mistaken, interconnection. They're basically the ERCOT of some of the other states, which include, they actually control most of Texas that is outside of the main electrical grid. Okay, so there's 10% of people, just to give you guys the quick maths here, 90% is controlled by ERCOT in most of Texas. 10% is controlled. You have like 10%, which is controlled by either, again, people living not connected to it or connected to other or some of the other interconnections. The Southwest Power Pole controls most of the area that isn't connected to the main or the main Texas interconnection. Okay, Southwest Power Pole, and it had 14. I almost got the number right. Had rolling blackouts in 14 states, including the parts that are in Texas. And you may say, well, they had rolling blackouts and it wasn't as bad as like having like your power shut out. Well, that same thing can be said about the main Texas interconnection. My power never went out for like 24, 30, 48 hours. My power never did that. And I'm part of the main Texas interconnection. See, these arguments are easily addressed. They just yell to each other in this echo chamber because they think they roll some crackhead ass academic University of Texas associate professor, right? And he says, well, according to my calculations, if they were part of the winterizing and the federal regulations, blah, 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 is what they say. And it doesn't even make sense. It doesn't make sense. None of it makes sense. So you mean to tell me if Southwest Power Pole controlled all of Texas, they would have prevented this issue? So wait a minute, them taking control over even more land, being responsible for even a greater population, they would have been able to stop this issue from happening, though they couldn't stop a rolling blackout in the states they already control? Huh? Again, these nonsensical arguments are easily able to be addressed. It's not like what I'm saying is you have to be a big time professional one of these fraud academics that can mix and mash numbers. No, just use your common sense. Facts. Let's go through the facts. Almost 200,000 people in Mississippi, 300,000 in Oregon without power, and that thing slowly dwindled. Let's go to the receipts. Let's see where we're at right now in terms of the power outage in the U.S. right now. Texas is still in the lead, but barely. Mississippi, so basically Mississippi is slower than Texas. Texas had like 3 million some people, and now they're basically the same. So they got hit almost as bad. They had almost as much outage. Again, it was slightly more when you consider the percentage of the population, but theirs was still a significant amount, just like Texas's was. So you got the East and the West that we have taken care of. Apparently, them being part of those interconnections didn't stop them from having outages. It's almost as if the storm was actually pretty bad. But for whatever reason, because Texas is 90% of Texas's electrical load is handled by ERCOT, which shouldn't be, by the way. But because it's not attached to the main two interconnections, all of a sudden this problem wouldn't have been a problem. Okay, why didn't Oregon winterize? Why didn't Mississippi winterize? Why? It doesn't make sense. These are arguments that don't make any damn sense. But because people on like Twitter, they don't think. You cannot teach these guys how to think. You can only tell them what to think. And they saw somebody with a blue check mark repeat it, Texas Tribune or something, rolled out some fucking article trying to demonize Texas. And then when you just sit up and take a step back, look at the math yourself, look at what happened itself, and you're sitting there like, wait a minute. It doesn't seem like this problem would have been prevented either way it went. They can't point to the specific federal regulation that would have required them to weatherize. And apparently weatherizing didn't help Oregon and it didn't help Mississippi. Why would it have helped Texas? I'm not saying anything that's just that nobody else can discover. All I'm showing you and I'm trying to highlight more so is, and this is my problem with a lot of people in this country, they do not know how to think. So what they do is simply accept people's word for stuff. And they just repeat what they heard. How many times have you heard people say winterize and weatherize that probably never have used that term in their life? How many times? It's like with the insurrection thing. They get a new update and then they just repeat it. So someone else they saw said it, so they repeated it. Well, Texas avoided federal regulations, and because they avoided federal regulations, this problem happened. Hey, I hear what you're saying. What specific federal regulation are you talking about? They malfunction because their code didn't account for that. They didn't account for that follow-up question. They just expect you to just take their word for it. Okay, why did Oregon? Why did that happen to Oregon? Why did that happen to Mississippi? If being part of the main interconnections would have helped them, they say, well, it would have. They could have brought some electricity and all this from other states. Well, Oregon could have did that. Why didn't that stop them from still having these issues? Right? Texas is out basically now in terms of when it comes to the population. Now, both when it comes to comparable to the population, both Oregon and Mississippi right now have worse outages when it comes to electricity. Right now, again, going to the receipts. Right now, apparently, because there's 30 million people in Texas, so they're handling it worse at this point. Is anybody bringing that up? No, just me. Just me, that's it. Didn't help them being part of the Western and the Eastern. I got both sides taken care of here. East and Western interconnections did not stop them from having problems. Why on earth, if Texas were a part of them, that would have prevented what happened from Texas? I'm not even saying that there weren't things that they could do to solve the problem. I've long said my solution ain't y'all's solution. I'm talking complete decentralization. I'm not talking about having a regulatory body facilitated by way of the state that controls 90% of the electrical load. No, I'm talking about complete privatization. I'm talking about complete decentralization. No subsidies, no grants, no central planning when it comes to development of energy. All this wind and shit that y'all been focusing on. Hell, didn't Governor Abbott actually win an award for that, man? I think he won an award for his so hyper focus on like energy, wind energy and shit. None of that. Get that out of the way. How about let the market itself dictate what's the more efficient energy? Is it wind? Probably not, but maybe. Solar? Probably not, maybe. Coal, natural gas, nuclear. Let them compete in an actual market, not one that is facilitated by the state, and also the market being muddied up because there's subsidies being made, which gives them this incentive to create that specific type of energy. None of that. Let them focus on what they will focus on. right? But I'm also not going to pretend that that would mean perfection. Look, dog, it's fucking weather, bro. It's weather. Like, you can't account for every single thing. You just can't. I'm not saying that Texas could have did better or some of these companies could have did better. Again, this is why I want to get the market actually working and get these fools out of the way. I'm not saying that it would have been completely prevented. What I'm saying is the narratives that a lot of people are running with simply don't make any sense. They're repeated. But this is why they can never provide you with specifics. What specific? That's all I encourage you to ask them. What specific federal regulation are you talking about? Number one, it's not like Texas electrical grid is completely unregulated. I mentioned in my previous videos, they had to freaking ask permission to the Fed right before the storm hit. So this is around like the 14th. They had to ask permission because they knew they were going to have to maximize the output, and they were going to be in violation of certain like dumb emission like laws, federal laws and stuff. So they had to ask the Fed's permission to use their own energy. So it's not like they're unregulated anyway by way of the Fed, maybe not to the degree of the two main interconnections, but they're still regulated. So I ask you, what specific one are you talking about? You say, well, yeah, it wasn't the wind turbines that froze up. Wind turbines in Alaska work. Yeah, so do coal and natural gas, like coal mines and whatever. Those work too in those very cold spots. It's almost like if you just prepare for it, it'll work. That's not a special thing. They were winterized it. Well, yeah, they could have winterized the coal and natural gas too. That's not an argument. But that's the thing. Most of them, what they say aren't arguments. They're just claims. And then they expect you to just take their word for it and run with it. And that is my problem. And I'll continue to state it. It's that people do not know how to think. They don't know how to think. They're told what to think. And if they think that it perpetuates this nonsensical narrative, I done went through about a 17-minute long video. I done went through, I don't know how much stuff. I'm at 17 minutes now. Just this easily debunked bullcrap that these guys just get out there and just peddle, and they expect you to just take their word for it. It doesn't make sense. But like I said, when it comes to leftists, there's absolutely no issue that they will look at, and they just think that regulations can solve every single thing. And so even when the regulators fail, it's somehow the fault of some, I don't know, private institutions and stuff like that. Unbelievable. Every single time. It's never the fault of the regulators. It just needed a little bit of more regulation. So tax spin, whatever, regulate, rule over. As long as we just do more of that, because corporations, greedy. Same old, just generic, vague terms that these guys don't even know what they mean. Oh, it's ERCOT. Well, ERCOT's a corporation. Yeah, that's a legal definition, you crackhead ass little boy. Like, corporation does not mean big business, fool. It never meant that. You were too stupid to realize, so you just repeat what everybody else said. You think corporation is big business. No. You know what else is it's technically a non-profit corporation? The Southwest Power Pole, which is connected to the Eastern Interconnection. Fool, what are you talking about? That doesn't mean that it's like a private institution, but these people are stupid, man. We're dealing with dumb people that don't know how to think. So they just repeat what they heard someone else say. They think this is the chance to demonize Texas because it is the one state that, because it handles most of its electrical load, it could detach from the feds. And they don't like that. So anytime, no matter how inconsistent they are, they would demonize it at every single turn. Well, this is why you need the federal government. Wait a minute. Oregon has 300,000 people out of power at the same damn time. Oh, look the other way. Squirrel. Look at Texas. These guys are unbelievable. Take that back. They are believable. They're just believably stupid.